Most of us are probably familiar with the shadow people, those mysterious, dark beings that appear in people's bedrooms at night, standing at their bedsides and watching them sleep. During an encounter with the shadow people, the victims are usually rendered paralyzed, unable to move, speak, or call out for help. Many times, the shadow people threaten their victims, speaking to them in demonic voices, telling them that they're going to die soon, and asking their victims if they know who they, the shadow people, are. Sometimes the shadow people are accompanied by evil-looking animals or small imp-like beings that sit on their victim's chest, making it very difficult for them to breathe. The most well-known figure among the shadow people is known as the Hat Man. He is a tall, dark figure with glowing eyes, and he wears a wide-rimmed hat. The Hat Man often stands off in the corner, just watching the horror as it takes place in the room. It's almost as if he is observing or orchestrating the whole event. Many people believe that the Hat Man is the ringleader of the shadow people. Now there is another being that is very similar to the shadow people, and he is known as the Grinning Man. The Grinning Man is said to be 7 feet tall, have dark eyes that are set very far apart on his face. He often wears a one-piece metallic suit, and he wears a constant grin upon his face that is said to be inhuman and malevolent. The victims of the Grinning Man are often awoken from their sleep by a clicking noise in the room or next to their ear. When they awaken, there is the Grinning Man, staring, watching, waiting. The strangest thing about the Grinning Man is that he is often connected with the UFO phenomenon, and many people have claimed to see him during UFO flaps around the world. There is one incident where a woman awoke in the night to see the Grinning Man outside her bedroom window staring at her. She was horrified, but couldn't move or call out to her husband, who was sleeping next to her. To her absolute horror, she said her body was lifted from the bed and began floating over toward the window, coming closer and closer to the horrible face. Now, I don't know about you, but this sounds an awfully lot like the alien abduction scenario. And all of these situations seem to be closely related in many ways. The shadow people, aliens, the Grinning Man, they all show up in people's bedrooms at night, render them paralyzed and helpless, and do some terrible thing to them that leaves their victim in absolute dread. I'm beginning to think that all of these things are connected, and I made this video because I learned something about the Grinning Man this week that really opened my eyes and made me sit up and take notice. And I myself witnessed something very strange when I was about 12 years old. It's an incident that I think about a lot, and it never quite made sense to me. There were just pieces of the puzzle that didn't fit the whole narrative in my mind. At first, I always looked back at this incident and thought that I had seen a ghost. But now, I'm not so sure. So what was this incident that happened to me when I was 12 years old? It was a weeknight, probably late February, early March. I was sitting on the couch in my living room. I was just a kid, sitting there watching TV. My brother was in our room doing whatever it is he was doing. My mother was in the kitchen cooking dinner. My father was still at work. So I'm sitting there on the couch watching TV, and I hear this clicking noise next to my ear. It sounded like someone grinding or clicking their fingernails. And I ignored it. I thought it was something in the wall next to the couch. I just ignored it. It happened a second time, a little bit louder this time, and I ignored it again. The third time it happened, it was quite loud. It was like it was almost right up on my ear, just clicking. And at that moment, I felt something touching me on the back of my head, like it was flicking at the hair on the back of my head. So I turned, and what I saw was this being that had a very large bulbous head, a very thin, spindly body. It looked like an alien gray, but it wasn't gray, it wasn't white. It was the color of human flesh, but the flesh seemed to be glowing and illuminated. It had no face, it had no eyes, no nose, no mouth. And around this being was a very bright yellow aura. And this thing was just standing there, just flicking at the hair on the back of my head. I looked at it for a few seconds, and naturally I jumped up and I ran into the kitchen where my mother was. For years after that, I had told people that that was the first ghost that I had ever seen. But the thing that always puzzled me about it was the way that it looked. I'd seen ghosts before, I've seen strange things before, but I'd never seen anything quite like that. And it wasn't until years later when I saw the rendition of the alien gray with the large head, the very thin, wispy body. That was the first thing that popped into my thoughts, was like, oh my God, that's the thing I saw in the living room. Um, Very similar, but it didn't have the large, dark, almond-shaped eyes. So what I learned about the grinning man this week that I already mentioned in the video, was the clicking sound. The clicking sound that wakes his victims up in the night, sometimes in the room, sometimes right next to their ear, very loud, waking them up from a sound sleep. That was kind of an aha moment for me. And I just learned that probably 2 days ago. I've heard about the grinning man before, but this was something that I've never read. And then I looked into it, and sure enough, a lot of people that experienced the grinning man also experienced the clicking, in the room or next to their ear. That was something for me when I thought about it. When we're talking about the shadow people, the grinning man, aliens, so many similarities. I would say they're probably not the same being, but the same kind of being. All of them render their victims helpless, paralyzed, unable to move, unable to speak. They do something horrible to their victims, whether it's experimentation or just frightening the hell out of them, like the Shadow Man and the Grinning Man. Just fear and dread, unbelievable fear and dread that these people feel. Could it be that these beings are parasitic? They are feeding off of our fear, as some people suspect. Is this why the Hat Man stands in the corner watching everything taking place in the room during a shadow people experience? Is he orchestrating it? Is he feeding off the fear and the dread that these people feel? The same with the grinning man. He just stands there looking. I don't know that there's any reports that he ever actually touched people, threatened people, took them aboard a UFO, even though he is connected with UFO sightings quite often. He's just there watching, staring, terrorizing the person in the bed. Is he feeding off that terror? It's an interesting thought. I think there's some truth to it. I think these beings are all related somehow. Again, not the same being, but the same kind of being. Whether we call them um, demons, jinn, there are many names for them as there are belief systems in the world. But all of the holy books, all of the belief systems, all of the religions warn us about them and tell us not to open the door to them, not to commune with these things or bring them into our world or our lives. And it's interesting too because there are so many people that experience these things. I think it's negativity and stress that bring them into our lives. When I was a kid, the neighborhood and the house I lived in was like the Amityville Horror. And there was a lot of negativity in my house, in my home, in the neighborhood, and this stuff just went ballistic. So I think it's that kind of energy that draws these things into our lives. I think they do feed off of it. And it's interesting because even religious people, and it's usually those religious people that have a very hellfire and brimstone, be afraid of God kind of religion, that are actually fall victim to things like alien abduction, shadow people. They're not exempt from it just because they're religious. I think it's important to have a positive spiritual foundation in our lives, to be connected to things like peace, love, and light. I think that kind of energy coming to us, through us, emanating from us, really does keep these things at bay. I think if our guard is down, if we're overly negative, overly stressed, overly um, anxious in life, or fearful, or maybe have no belief system at all, we're just kind of, bopping through life, as it is, I think we leave ourselves vulnerable to these things. We hear a lot about the power of love, and I think that it is the power and energy of love that repels these things. And if we have it in our hearts and our souls, I think it makes it more difficult for these things to get at us. So I don't want this whole channel to major on beings from other dimensions, but it's something that I think I've pretty much come to my conclusions about in life, and there's a couple more incidents I want to share that I witnessed. I want to share in videos on YouTube that maybe will just put some pieces together for other people out there listening to the channel. But I think they are from other dimensions. I don't think they're from Mars. There's a Pleiades or wherever else people think they're from. I think it's another dimension. I think they're another life form. I think they're a spiritual or energy life form. Not that I don't think that there could be life on other planets. I think there's good and bad entities and beings throughout the universe as we know it and as we don't know it yet. But I think a lot of these things are energetic, spiritual in nature, and this is why they do what they do. It's to feed on our fear, to weaken us, to frighten us. Something they take from that experience, and it's only love and light that will keep them out of our bedrooms at night. I truly believe that. So that's all for now. I thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next upload. I hope you enjoyed the video, and that it brought a little information to some folks that maybe was lacking in their own research, and you'll have your own aha moment as I did this week doing my research on the Grinning Man. Thank you all for watching and have a blessed day.